Whoa, holy crap guys, Scott Pilgrim is back. This week it was announced that a fucking Scott Pilgrim anime is going to be made by Masaaki Yuasa's groundbreaking animation studio Saru, which is a sexy, insane fusion of my old love for Scott Pilgrim and my current obsession with the recent prolific progress made by the anime studio Saru. So let's start off by talking about the media explosion that was Scott Pilgrim back in the day. Scott Pilgrim started off as a random weeb webcomic in the mid-2000s when there were a lot of weeb webcomics trying to get on top. Anyway, so Scott Pilgrim is the story of a nerd named Scott who's trying to win over a manic pixie dream girl named Ramona Flowers, but to do so he has to defeat her 7 evil exes in a series of 1990s video game logic punch battles. Now, the comic was inspired by Brian Lee O'Malley's life as a nerd in Canada, and the uniquely weird punk rock, but also Asian pop culture vibe that runs through a lot of Canada's major cities. Now, like I was saying, back in the 2000s, there were a lot of weird anime, video game inspired webcomics that ran wild on the internet back in that time. Mega Tokyo is fucking huge. There was also Alguna Shy for a while, and there was a Mega Man ripoff comic called Bob and George, which I used to read, but now it's gone. Oh, and does Strong Bad count? Was he a webcomic? I don't know. Anyway, unfortunately, pretty much all these various comics, despite their varying levels of success and fame at the time, eventually crumbled because the artists gave up the fight. They got crushed under their real-life issues, and a lot of them just imploded on themselves, fizzled up, or went on too long and faded into obscurity. Now, if you had spoken to me in 2004 and asked me which nerd subculture comic would one day be adapted into a hit cult movie, and then a hit River City Ransom ripoff video game, I probably would have bet everything on being Mega Tokyo, but I was wrong. It was Scott Pilgrim. Now, Scott Pilgrim ironically outdid all of its new age brothers and sisters by keeping it tight and keeping it old school, because Scott Pilgrim got published as a graphic novel, which gave it the indie cred and made its creator Brian Lee O'Malley a comic book artist, as opposed to an inferior webcomic artist. Also, the fact that it was only 6 volumes, and the fact it had a really solid ending, and the fact that he didn't try to turn it into a cash cow to pay his rent like the other webcomic people, kept it pure and a genuinely good experience. Because again, all these other webcomics just fizzled out in various phases of Bleach-style comic death. Now, it wasn't a purely one-sided win though, because Scott Pilgrim's old-style media approach did slow down its rise to superstardom, although it eventually got there. While most of the webcomics it was competed against achieved instant fame by being webcomics, Pilgrim's fame didn't really consolidate until 2010, when the comic series had finally ended and people were reading it from start to finish. Although by that time, all of its major competitors had straight up died off because it's hard to maintain a webcomic. But again, the real major advantage that Scott Pilgrim had over all the other webcomics was it was a real comic. And a real comic is very easy to sell to Hollywood as a movie, but a webcomic is not. So with that out of the way, they sold it to Hollywood, and Universal and the fucking best British director ever, Edgar Wright, took a crack at making Scott Pilgrim vs. the World a cult indie movie. And they did it in 2010. Although ironically, when it finally came out, I found myself stranded in South Korea. Now, South Korea got almost all the same movies America did. I mean, I at least got to watch the A-Team movie the day it came out. But I didn't get to watch Scott Pilgrim because for whatever reason, it just wasn't a big enough deal. So I didn't actually get to see this movie until I returned to the United States. But it was so fucking good, I instantly bought the Blu-ray because I just had to support this madness. By the way, let's talk about Edgar Wright a sec. Edgar Wright, fucking genius. His most recent film was the brilliant Baby Driver, a film that literally everyone loved unless they were some fat, unwashed, angry old man who wears a red golf shirt in public. Who would do that? Anyway, Edgar Wright is the reason the first Ant-Man movie is so good, because he wrote it. Now, most people know of Edgar Wright and like him because he made Shaun of the Dead, which was a very funny zombie movie. Possibly the funniest zombie movie. But a lot of people don't know that before this, he did a TV show called Space. Now, if you like British TV, you gotta watch it, because it ran for 3 whole years on the BBC and got a whole 14 episodes. Now, Spaced is literally a show with all the actors from Shaun of the Dead doing a kind of Three's Company, we're sharing an apartment thing. But it contains various fantasy scenes that rip off old American movies, and it has this really weird, surreal tone, which I would awkwardly describe as very in line with a British live-action version of the regular show. Anyway, Spaced pretty much perfectly set up Wright to do Scott Pilgrim, because he was already used to doing these strange fantasy scenes, these strange meta subculture jokes. Like, he did a surprisingly tight adaptation of the book series in this movie, and his penchant for making fun of American culture in space perfectly led him into doing anime and video game jokes in this movie. And yeah, the movie's fucking great. I mean, Michael Cera is a fucking dweeb, but this is his best performance ever. They got a lot of awesome people in this movie. Freaking Aubrey Plaza's there, Brandon Roof's there, freaking Brie Larson before she became Nah, I can't say anything good about Brie Larson. And yeah, most of everyone who was in this movie has like gone on to do pretty good things. Anyway, the Scott Pilgrim multimedia explosion was always planned to have 4 separate sides. First was the comic, then it split off into the video game, the movie, and the anime. Now, the video game barely got made correctly, but when it did, it was a total freaking hit. It became such a strong cult classic that it recently got re-released on the Nintendo Switch due to strong demand from people who wanted to play it again, because for years it had been trapped on the PS3 and the only way to play it was to get my PS3 out of the closet. Also, it was originally planned that each of the different adaptations of Scott Pilgrim would have slightly different tweaks to the story in a kind of Pokemon Red versus Pokemon Blue kind of way. Now, the movie definitely skims over the evil Asian twins, but if you play the video game, they attack Scott with their evil giant robot. But the biggest difference I think I need to talk about is what almost happened with the ending. See, even though the movie and the comics end with Scott and Ramona getting together and Scott gets the girl he wanted, and then they go off to have a life together, Edgar Wright originally planned for a shocking twist ending where Scott would actually dump Ramona and end up with his original badass Asian girlfriend, Knives Chow. And if you know this is coming, if you've seen the alternate ending and you rewatch the movie, they're kind of hinting at it, since even though Ramona's very cool, she comes with so much baggage and so many problems. And meanwhile, look at Knives. Knives is constantly bettering herself just to get Scott back. Also, Knives and Scott had so many common interests. They played the same video games, they liked the same stuff. Knives genuinely admired Scott, whereas Ramona had literally nothing in common with Scott, didn't really think of him too highly, and honestly, all they really had was this intense sexual tension. But then again, that's kind of a strong motivator. Let me know if you prefer Ramona or Knives to win. But anyway, so today we need to talk about the third aspect of the Scott Multimedia Blast, which was the anime. So originally back in 2010, to promote the movie to anime nerds on Adult Swim, they dropped a pilot for a Scott Pilgrim anime. It was a 6-minute short. It was completely in the original style of the books. It was kind of done on the cheap by Studio Titmouse, who does a lot of things for Adult Swim. It was a very pure adaptation of the book, possibly the most purest, considering that the video game is a video game and the movie changed a lot of stuff. But it did have a lot of the film actors reprising their roles. The pacing goes by pretty fast because it's a pilot, and ultimately this never got adapted into a series, and it just served as a weird promotional video for the movie. Until now. So recently we hit the 10-year anniversary of Scott Pilgrim, and the movie went into this very weird kind of renaissance phase. Since it's been 10 years since it came out, everyone's kind of had time to realize that this fucking movie rules. It's the best movie Edgar Wright ever made. It's kind of the best video game movie because it's not actually about one video game. And it's almost the best comic book movie because it really fucking sticks to the comic book. And yeah, so people have had time to realize that the movie fucking rules, the video game rules, and the comic books are great too. So after the video game just got re-released, there was some weird pressure on the cast and crew out of nowhere to do a sequel or something, but there is no sequel. So they decided instead that since the anime was the missing piece of the puzzle, they're finally going to make the anime. And then fucking out of nowhere, Studio Science Saru swept in to make a full Scott Pilgrim anime, adapting all 6 of the books. And this is fucking monumental. So, Studio Science Saru is Masaki Yuasa's studio. Masaki Yuasa rose to prominence doing the extremely surreal out-of-body anime Haiba, and then created one of my favorite multiverse anxiety animes, Tatami Mac Galaxy. I fucking love this show. It's almost a show that resembles the way I think. And I've been so meaning to review this for the channel, but I just haven't had time to get around to it. Anyway, eventually he got a crew together and they became Science Saru. Science Saru actually got their first big start when they worked on a random surreal psychedelic episode of Adventure Time. Then they also helped out on OKKO, and recently they did an episode of Star Wars Visions. So they do a lot of American studio work, actually. I would say they do more than the average anime studio. But they really, really got on my radar after they created Devilman Crybaby, which I think was really their full rise to maturity as a studio. Anyway, after that, they've had a bunch of fucking hits after that. They did the extremely good Keep Your Hands Off the Isaacin, and then the extremely frustrating Japan Sinks 2020, which was actually the first anime I ever reviewed on this channel because I got so fucking pissed at this fucking Devilman ripoff girl who let all her friends die, who let her parents die, and she let her fucking leg rot off even though she was a professional runner. They also did the extremely happy ocean movie Lou Over the Wall, back to back with the extremely depressing ocean movie Ride Your Wave. Anyway, Scott Pilgrim is the first time they're tackling an entire American franchise to adapt into an anime, and this is going to be insane. Especially if they do it anything like they did with Japan Sinks or Devilman. And if they do it like those, then expect Yuasa to insert a random rap musical scene because he just seems to do that in like all his anime. But good God, I am so psyched up for this. What do you guys think? I've covered a lot in this video game, but what was your favorite Scott Pilgrim? Was it the comic, the movie, the video game? Are you going to watch this anime? Should Edgar Wright have gotten an Oscar for the absolute undeniable masterpiece, which is Baby Driver, the only rhythmic movie ever made? And will Brian Lee O'Malley ever get around to making a comic? All these answers and more will be in my next YouTube video. Actually, probably not, but anyway, please subscribe because I do YouTube videos a lot, and I'm only 200 people from being monetized, and holy shit, that's so close. Anyway, I'm your Buster Green. I'm signing out. Have a good weekend. Later, guys.